Jesus is coming. I genuinely don't remember the first time I heard that phrase, but I know I was young.
Hey kids, I'm Ricky the Raptor, here to tell you about the Rapture. The Rapture is the beginning of the end of the world. It starts with all true Christians floating up to heaven.
What about the sinners that are left behind?
Well, Jojo, they get to witness the second coming of Jesus.
I'm sure I heard it on some television show or something, though I know I was aware of the idea of the rapture by the time I was in 5th grade, or when I was about 10 years old, or oh god, 21 years ago. That is not okay. My knowledge of the rapture can legally drink. I know it was the 5th grade because I remember being in a particular teacher's class when I began reading Left Behind the Kids, and shortly after that, the Left Behind main series. So the concept of Jesus' imminent return is not foreign to me. There's just one problem. Jesus is always coming. And he won't stop coming.
He turned water into fire.
Disclaimers. Hi everyone, I'm Amy. I am a millennial trans woman who was raised evangelical, more specifically in the Calvary Chapel system of churches. Oh, and I am currently an atheist, so if you have found my video because you are looking for some end times prophecies, I apologize for clogging up your feed with this video. However, since you're here, thank you for making it this far, and I invite you to stay. And just as a content warning, this video does get a little heavy, so if any of these subject matters are a bother for you, I understand you not joining us this time. Because in addition to talking about the rapture, which is very traumatic in its own right, there's even a hashtag rapture anxiety, we will briefly be discussing mass suicide, attempted suicide, and filicide, both attempted and successful. If there's a beginning, there's certainly an end. Right? An alpha and omega. One common belief in many denominations of Christianity is that the world ends at the second coming of Christ, ushering in the day of judgment. Once every soul has been assigned to either paradise or damnation, Christ will rule the paradise on earth for 1,000 years.
And at the second coming, Jesus is going to come back to this planet. He's going to judge his enemies. He's going to set up his kingdom, and he'll rule over the earth for a 1,000-year period that is called the millennium.
It cannot be said that every Christian believes this, as Christianity has thousands of denominations around the world, but for the sake of today's video, it's what we're focusing on. This belief is known as millennialism. Millennialism as an idea, while not wholly American, has had long-lasting impacts on the United States. Most important to what we're talking about today, however, is a particular type of millennialism known as pre-tribulation dispensationalism. This is your popular rapture theology. This is the stuff that you'd see in, like, the Left Behinds. The idea is that believers would be taken up to heaven before a 7-year tribulation when the Antichrist would come to power. In addition to believers, children under the age of accountability will be taken, as will the dead in Christ.
You have no idea how scared I was when I opened up that lid. I mean, it was like my heart believed it all, but somehow my brain wasn't convinced of it yet. But somehow I did manage to muster up the courage to look inside. And Dad was gone. I mean, it was fabulous, Helen.
One of the most important individuals to popularize this was Anglo-Irish pastor John Nelson Darby. It wasn't until about 1854 that James Inglis began writing Waymarks in the Wilderness, a publication inspired by Darby that brought millennialism to the United States. There are many preachers in the 19th and early 20th century that helped spread this belief, but for the sake of how it impacts us today, I must jump to the 1960s. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but the 1960s had these people called hippies? I know it sounds far-fetched, but I promise you, it's true. Well, these people were the counterculture youth of the 1960s. They fought against senseless wars, capitalism, racism, imperialism, etc. Essentially, they were badasses. But not everyone stayed around to fight the good fight, and those disillusioned by the hippie movement found a new belief system: Jesus. The ex-hippie Christians would go on to create the Jesus movement. The Jesus movement is a whole subject unto itself that I don't feel like getting into today. Simply stated, the Jesus movement made being a Christian cool. Also, since they were hippies, they tended to like living in communes, and as a communist, I gotta say, I approve. The Jesus movement would slow down, but it lives on in many ways. Being a charismatic movement, many churches, in including many megachurches, came out of the movement. It was the Jesus movement that brought Christian rock into existence and that brought bands into churches. Obviously, after making Jesus cool, it was time to make millennialism cool.
Lots of American Protestants have been expecting the end of the world sooner rather than later. This apocalyptic strain has waxed and waned and comes in different flavors. Then, in the late 1960s, along with so much other magical thinking, it got an improbable boost from the counterculture.
In 1970, Hal Lindsey published The Late Great Planet Earth with co-author Carol C. Carlson. In it, they would lay out that recent catastrophes were prophesied in the Bible, and they prophesied things to come. The same year, Larry Norman would release I Wish We'd All Been Ready, bringing the Rapture to modern music. And just a side note, if I never hear that song again, that'd be perfectly fine.
A hill, one disappears and one's left standing still. I wish we'd all been ready. Two men walking up a hill, one disappears and one's left standing still. I wish we'd all been ready.
Two men walking up a hill, one disappears and one's left standing still. I wish we'd all been ready. Two men walking up a hill, one disappears and one's left standing still. I wish we'd all been ready. Two men walking up a hill, one disappears and one's left standing still. I wish we'd all been ready.
You know the story about the two men standing in a field? One gets taken, the other guy's just left standing there? It's, two women standing in a kitchen. One gets taken, the other one's left doing the dishes.
The Rapture was brought to film in 1972 in A Thief in the Night, which spawned 3 sequels through 1983. Unlike A Thief in the Night, in 1976, The Late Great Planet Earth was adapted into a theatrical release, narrated by Orson Welles. And is this guy supposed to look like Orson Welles, the Omega Code? Then the 80s happened. Well, no, the rest of the 70s then happened, but after that, then the 80s happened. It was in the 1980s that some very important things started to happen. Having been founded in 1979, the moral majority began gaining traction until it burned out in 1989. But man, oh man, did it have an impact. Before the founding of the moral majority, it was kind of commonplace for American Protestants to keep religion and politics separate, but they changed that. In 1980, the United States elected Ronald Reagan thanks in no small part to the moral majority. Jerry Falwell Sr., founder of the organization, said on Carter's loss in 1980, "I knew that we would have some impact on the national elections, but I had no idea that it would be this great." And of course, the moral majority was composed of millennialists, such as known date giver Pat Robertson.
I'd give it 1982, but date setting is dangerous.
And the man that talked Falwell into founding the moral majority, Tim Lahaye.
In my counseling experience and observation seeing hundreds of people, I have never found a happy marriage where the wife is not in submission to her husband. No exceptions.
If the name Tim Lahaye rings any bells, he was the co-author of the Left Behind series, which he began releasing with Jerry B. Jenkins in 1995. In the presidential elections of the year 2000, Tim Lahaye would be what brought evangelicals to vote for George W. Bush. It was also around this time that Paul and Peter Lalonde began Cloud 10 Pictures. They would produce Christian films, most of it being about the end times. On October 31st, the year 2000, Cloud 10 Pictures would release Left Behind the movie, which, though originally released as a video, did see a small theatrical release, with 2 straight-to-market sequels and a theatrical remake. And thanks to the internet, millennialism has gone nowhere.
Rapture now, please. Hashtag Rapture now. Please, Jesus, come back. And let him that heareth say, come. Do you want Jesus to come?
Okay, but now why do I say Jesus won't stop coming? Well, despite the fact that Jesus said no man knew the hour, people have been trying their best to predict the end of the world. Jesus himself is reported to have said, "For the Son of Man will come into the glory of his Father with his angels, and then he will render to everyone according to his deeds." Most certainly, I tell you, there are some standing here who will in no way taste of death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Matthew 16:27-28, Word English Bible. So that was a swing and a miss. Let's skip to the 19th century, and at that point we start getting some concrete dates. In the early 19th century, Baptist pastor William Miller predicted that the end of the world would come in 1844. This actually grew into a popular belief known as Millerites. The day would pass with nothing of note happening, and this would be known as the Great Disappointment. Despite the fact that nothing happened, there were believers who were actually still hyped up. Eventually, a few denominations would spring out of this, including the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Seventh-day Adventists. The Jehovah's Witnesses would go on to predict several more dates, saying that the end of the world would come in one way or another in 1878, 1881, 1914, 1918, 1925, 1975, and their final prediction was just the 20th century. Based on the evidence laid out by Hal Lindsey and C.C. Carlson, people believed the rapture would happen by the end of 1988. Pat Robertson predicted first that the world would end in 1982. When that failed to happen, he predicted that the end would come in 1988. Oh, wait, what is that in my script? Oh, he ran for president in 1988. You could see how I was confused there.
And that's why I'm here in Bedford-Stuyvesant, and that's why you're here together with me.
Then last year, he predicted that Donald John Trump would win the 2020 election, bringing the beginning of the end.
And the next thing is the election that's coming up in just a few weeks, at which time, according to what I believe the Lord told me, the president is going to be reelected.
In the 1970s, Bonnie Nettles and Marshall Applewhite would believe themselves to be the two witnesses in the book of Revelation and would start Heaven's Gate. I've seen June 6th, 2006 given as a date for the second coming. Harold Camping predicted, well, he's actually predicted a few different dates, most recently being May 21st, 2011, and then October 21st, 2011. It didn't happen. A few years later, megachurch pastor John Hagee would say that the four blood moons in 2014 and 2015 were signs of the end. I've seen some people saying Pope Francis would be the last pope based on a prophecy. I've seen the election of Joe Biden be a sign of the end of times. I've seen the election of Trump be a sign of the end of times. And of course, I've seen the election of Obama being the sign of the end of times.
So I'm not willing to say, yep, that's him, he's the Antichrist. No. But I am willing to ask the question and let you figure it out for yourself. What do you think?
And of course, whenever there is anything happening in Israel, it's for sure signs that the end is near.
I'm talking about the timeline now, and I believe that the rapture, the Gog-Magog war, we're already seeing the Gog-Magog war begin to happen on the northern border of Israel right now, and with Hamas and Hezbollah. It's happening right before our very eyes.
Now, when I was a believer, the thing that had me convinced we were in the end of days was 9/11. We as a nation felt a collective trauma over that, and as someone who had been invested in eschatology, or eschatology being the theology of end times, I remember thinking, oh crap, Vancouver, this is it. One specific memory I have is at the church's harvest party in October of 2001. I remember hearing others saying, oh, we're surely in the end of days with all this going on. So this weighed heavy on 12-year-old me. Now, here's something about me. As I've made no secret in the past, I love Disneyland. And I have a hypothesis as to why. I mean, besides consumerism. My family first got Disneyland annual passes in mid-August of 2001. After the terrorist attacks of that year, the travel industry dried up and Disneyland was near abandoned. In fact, we had the cheapest passes. They bumped us up the next tier. And actually, it's like, oh, you guys only have Disneyland? California Adventure 2 is in there for free now, too. So something that my sister, my mother, and I would do would be to visit the park every Friday after school. My father didn't join because he worked swing shifts, although I guess he did go to Disneyland by himself sometimes. I think the reason I embraced Disneyland so much is that it was one of the few things that could pull my mind away from the horrors of what were soon to be. So why do I care so much about this? Why did I put forth all this effort into this video? Why can't I just let these people believe in what they believe? Truth be told, I'm not trying to stop anyone from being a millennialist. I'm fine with people, who are religious. Religious is a perfectly valid thing to be. I just ask you watch out for the charlatans. There's a lot of money and political gain to be made in eschatology, so it's safe to assume there are at least a few who do not believe in what they're saying.
I guess you'd say, Jim and Lori, help me be prepared today for end times. Oh, these end times, end times.
But the main reason I wanted to get this video out here is I want to make sure everybody knows about this. And this is a thing that does real damage. Belief in the rapture is traumatic. You suspect there's a reasonable possibility that this moment may be your last on Earth. When those trumpets sound, everything changes. Your chance at living a full life, gone.
All of which scared the hell out of me. If I got home from school and my parents weren't there, I would be so worried that they were raptured and I'd been left behind. I remember worrying that I wouldn't be able to get married or have kids because I would be raptured before it happened.
So why focus on living? Just prepare for the end. And it's at moments like these that I wonder if one of the reasons millennialism took off like it did was because of the Cold War. The youths had been prepared for the possibility of a nuclear strike at any time. When nuclear Armageddon didn't come to pass, did their minds attach to millennialism? Was being told the commies are godless scum who will kill you at a random moment condition people to suspect the end was always around the corner?
What's more far-fetched than people disappearing right out of their clothes? Who else could have done that? Years ago, we'd have blamed it on the Soviets, said they developed some new super technology, some death ray that affected only human flesh and bone. But there's no Soviet threat anymore.
This is kind of beautifully illustrated by the fact that Barry Maguire's hit song Eve of Destruction is on People Get Ready, a musical compilation. This is the Left Behind album. And of course, date giving is particularly harmful as people act on it. They give away their possessions. They put their lives on hold.
We thought Armageddon was coming in 1975. So I did not have a career. I didn't go to college because the end was so close. There was no need. The new world would be here.
They hurt others. And they hurt themselves. Even the vague, "we're for realsies in the end times" message hurts people. Okay, this song kind of pisses me off. How could such a terrible song slap this hard? I don't even like country music. And if I may, I'm going to go ahead and quote the best character in Cloud 10's Tribulation.
And it's not the book of Revelations, it's the book of Revelation. Thank you.
And there's a whole crossover between the prepper industry and pre-tribulation dispensationalists. Of course, most pre-tribulation dispensationalists believe they don't need to prep because they'll be taken, but you never know. Maybe that time you played Sudoku doomed you. What, with having to see sixes in patterns of 3? Or maybe literalists allow some leeway. For an example of how these cross over, look at Jim Bakker, a person I can legally call a fraud. Like, a jury of his peers found that to be true. He's here hawking buckets for the end times. Climate change is also a non-concern. They know how the world's ending, so burn all trash, even plastic, because the world's ending by Jesus, not melting ice caps.
Or the polar caps are going to melt and we're all going to drown. And I just want to say, have you ever seen a rainbow? Because every time there appears a rainbow, this is the promise of God that he will never again destroy the earth by water. Relax.
And any catastrophic weather events are signs of the end times. As he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be? What is the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" Jesus answered them, "Be careful that no one leads you astray, for many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the Christ,' and will lead you astray. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you aren't troubled, for all this must happen, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines, plagues, and earthquakes in various places. But all these things are the beginning of birth pains. Matthew 24, 3-8. Now, it's true that says nothing about wildfires or hurricanes, but I believe even the most devout biblical literalist will allow some leeway. Hurricanes are just birthing pangs. And of course, if they don't feel like leaning on an eschatology, they can always blame liberalism, or what the US knows as liberalism. Okay, to step back just a second, we need to go over some of the minutiae about the rapture. Shortly prior to the rapture, Israel, having been greatly outnumbered, will be attacked. But before any harm can befall the nation, the attackers are destroyed by fire, hail, and earthquakes. This is the Gog-Magog war that the earlier soothsayer was talking about. After the rapture, a great man will rise up. He will rise in power until he is the leader of the world. This man will be assassinated, but will rise again. He will command the world to take his mark. Without it, one cannot buy, sell, or trade, and all that refuse will be beheaded.
They're going to take you outside and lay you down. Now you close your eyes and tell them you love Jesus no matter what.
In the rebuilt Temple of Solomon, he will sit on the throne and declare himself God and the Messiah.
I have become king and God!
Eventually, there will be a great battle on the hill of Megiddo, where God defeats Satan and his armies, locking them away in the lake of fire for 1,000 years. After all souls have reached final judgment, Jesus will reign on earth until Satan breaks out. He is then defeated for good. Happy fun times for all eternity. Now, there are a couple of things there that might have stood out to you. So let's talk about those. First on our plate, a one-world government. Did you know that when you meet a fundamentalist, there's a 1 in 4 chance you've met somebody that believes in QAnon? Does that surprise you? Because it surprised me, but probably for the opposite reason. Honestly, that's lower than I expected. Millennialists aren't too fond of global agendas.
The beast. You made all that up, right? Of course you did.
Oh, no. Everything has been foretold in the book of Revelations.
What is that chinging noise?
One of those stealth helicopters with computerized noise cancellation capability. They're still working the chings out.
The United Nations, the European Union, and the Vatican are often looked at cautiously out of the belief that they may produce Satan or advance Satan's agenda. They are also afraid of the Illuminati. In his 1999 book, Rapture Under Attack, Tim Lahaye wrote, "I myself have been a 45-year student of the satanically inspired, centuries-old conspiracy to use government, education, and media to destroy every vestige of Christianity within our society and establish a new world order. Having read at least 50 books on the Illuminati, I am convinced that it exists and can be blamed for many of man's inhumane actions against his fellow man during the past 200 years." One thing that infuriates me about anyone discussing COVID vaccine hesitancy is that they ignore the impact of millennialists. They believe that COVID is a way to bring in a new world order, which, of course, if you point out to them that COVID's obviously real because all nations have acknowledged it, they'll turn it around as proof of a new world order.
Why now? Because of the presidential election. To defeat President Donald Trump, who had the U.S. economy booming and was systematically destroying the New World Order.
Once more, there's been a lot of hoopla, first over the possibility the COVID vaccine would contain a microchip, and then the requirement of vaccine passports. He causes all, the small and great, the rich and the poor, and the free and the slave, to be given marks on their right hands or on their foreheads, and that no one would be able to buy or to sell unless he has that mark, which is the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom, he who has understanding. Let him calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666. Revelation 13, 16-18. So, anything about COVID passports, I think that covers it. If you can't go anywhere without the passport, boom, it's the mark. But what about the microchips? Well, that's present too.
Register today for your very own personal 666 barcode implant.
Kathy, don't go to the supermarket today, 'cause there's a very strange man at the checkout stand, and there's a laser scanner where you put your hand.
We have settled on the technology, Viv continued. The miniature biochip with the suffix numbers embedded in it can be inserted as painlessly as a vaccination in a matter of seconds.
Whether it's brought into eschatology to drive fear of technology, or it just seemed like a logical leap, there are many that believe the mark of the beast will be a microchip. Oh, and since I'm playing a clip from the mark here, I feel I should ask, why does a science high school have a Left Behind book in its library, The Amazing Spider-Man? And why only book number 7? I wish that we could end this video here, but we can't. We need to talk about Israel. Jerusalem is integral to millennialism. Israel's enemies will be allied, but when they go to attack, they will be defeated. The Antichrist, taking credit for the miracle, then brokers a 7-year peace deal between Israel and her enemies. It's in the rebuilt Temple of Solomon that the Antichrist then commits his ultimate blasphemy.
I have become king and God!
Then in the end, the final war takes place on the hill of Megiddo, or Har-Mageddon. There's just a few problems with that, though. First, and this might just be me, but hear me out, it feels really cynical to say that the only way there's going to be peace in the Middle East is because of Satan. It just kind of leaves a bad taste in my mouth, you know? But more importantly is Solomon's temple. As of today, the temple is no more, and where it stood is in Palestinian territory. Not only that, but it is not vacant. The temple used to stand on the spot occupied by the Temple Mount, one of the holiest places in Islam, supposedly being the place where the Prophet of Islam ascended to heaven. So there's a few big things that need to happen. Millennialists believe that for the end times to happen, Israel must be a fully Jewish state. This belief is known as Christian Zionism.
This is a night to honor Israel, Texas style.
Unfortunately for us, millennialists do not rest on their laurels. They are a powerful force in the United States politics. Although not openly Christian, Donald Trump was able to curry favor with the evangelical vote by being pro-Israel.
There were 3.3 million Christians United for Israel in our organization, waiting for one candidate to stand up and speak up. The evangelicals flooded the voting booths this time like at no time in our history.
You heard them right. This bunch of fringe-dwelling internet lunatics think that Trump's gambit might hasten the end of the world, and they are into it. Essentially, Christian fundamentalists want to get rid of Muslims so that Jews can form a human target for the Antichrist and the world can end. In my church, we all just said, "Peace be with you," and went home and ate sandwiches.
In 2017, Donald Trump would move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, despite the fact that it is currently torn between states.
The other news swirling around the embassy's move to Jerusalem is what it could signal as part of biblical prophecy. For many evangelicals, it's one of the steps to the second coming of Jesus.
To add insult to injury, Trump's peace plan leaned heavily in Israel's favor. Then there's the Christians United for Israel, or CUFI, operated by John Hagee. CUFI is the largest pro-Israel group in the United States, and it is ran by Gentiles. And all the goyim say, here's some money from the CUFI. A not insignificant amount of CUFI's money would be used to build settlements in Palestinian territory.
What's dicey about CUFI is that a good deal of their money for Israel is spent on buildings and organizations in the Israeli settlements. These are massive Jewish communities built well within Palestinian territory, in violation of international law.
And if that was not bad in its own right, current Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu openly courts CUFI and millennialists. It would be disingenuous for me to say that millennialists are the cause for everything going on right now. That would just be a flat-out lie. What I can say, however, is that they worsen the situation. And I foresee me getting some anger for this statement, but they don't care about the Jewish people. Not really. They're just a pawn in their eschatological endgame.
Oh yeah, I remember those guys. Weren't they supposed to be God's chosen people?
That's what the Bible says.
Oh, I bet they always followed God's directions.
Ho, ho, ho! You'd think so, wouldn't you?
So, in ending, I think we need to talk about what we've learned today.
And so what we have learned
What's going on?
Where's
Where's this music coming from?
That
was weird.
You see, we know that God's word is for everyone. And now that our song is done, we'll take a look.
Did anybody else hear that? Or was that just me? Was that diegetic? If there's anything to learn today, there's a few things. First and foremost, there is a lot to be made in eschatology, be that money, or be that political power. We have also learned that this is a real-life issue with real-world consequences that we need to nip in the bud, or at least pay attention to. I honestly predict a lot of views are going to be from people looking for end times videos. Like, I think there's going to be a lot of people that watch this that do not agree a single word with me, and I'm going to be receiving a lot of hate and all that, which hate comments, hate watches, whatever, I can take those. But I'm just asking, hey, maybe share this around so I could get, well, just a better viewer base. Yeah, I want a better viewer base. But hey, thanks for tuning in, everyone. Take care of yourselves. Remember that you are valid. Bye-bye.
End times.